Welcome to my Wednesday ramblings. We start a new message series this weekend, Food for the Journey. It's based around chapter 6 of St. John's Gospel. We've moved from Mark's Gospel to chapter John for these next 5 weeks. The first weekend is basically telling us the story of the feeding of the 5,000, a passage that would have been in Mark's Gospel if we had continued to just simply progress through Mark's Gospel week by week. But as we move into John, we have not only the story of the feeding of the 5,000, but then we have that journey with the people who are there in the desert space, or at least away from the big towns, who are suddenly beginning to ask questions of Jesus about what he means about being the bread of life, about being the one who, if we eat his body and drink his blood, will have eternal life. And so there are a whole series of questions that we'd be able to explore through this series. Unfortunately, in lots of ways, we have the first weekend with the readings from John's Gospel and focus on the Gospel, and then the final weekend, 5 weeks' time, where we would also have the reading of the Gospel. In between that time, we have next weekend the celebration of confirmation in our parish. So obviously the bishop will be focusing more on confirmation and what that means in the lives of the young people being confirmed. On the following weekend, the 8th of August, we will be celebrating the feast day of Mary of the Cross MacKillop, the first Australian Catholic saint. On what would be the fourth weekend of the series, we celebrate the Feast of the Assumption, and that too has its own particular readings. And then finally we come back to the final passage of John chapter 6. So in a sense, starting a message series called Food for the Journey is a little bit presumptuous, because we're only having the beginning and the end. However, I will be recording on my podcast the weekly weekly homily that is based around this series. So even though I'll be preaching on the Feast of Mary of the Cross MacKillop and the Feast of the Assumption, a different message, I'll still be preaching this particular message series on my podcast. So if you'd like to catch up with the podcast, it's just mikedelaney.podomatic.com, and you'll find the information there. And so I look forward to catching up with you. So when you come to hear the story of what it means to be people who have been given food for the journey. Have a great week, and I'll catch you next time on my Wednesday ramblings.